All right, so let's take a trip back in time to 1953.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine, the Cold War at its peak,
Mm.
right? The world's kind of on edge a little bit.
Yeah.
And Iran, a country full of this ancient history and all these oil reserves,
Right.
becomes the setting for this, like, real-life spy thriller.
Oh,
We're
wow.
talking covert operations. We're talking political intrigue,
Yeah.
and a plot twist
Okay.
that would leave even, like, the most seasoned diplomat kind of speechless.
Wow, that
It's
sounds...
pretty wild.
Yeah.
This is the story of the 1953 Iranian coup,
Okay.
a pivotal event that I think continues to cast a long shadow on global politics, even to this day.
Right, and it's a story that's often, I think, shrouded in mystery and misinformation.
Absolutely.
But I think by piecing together, these declassified documents,
Yeah.
these firsthand accounts, the historical analysis,
Right.
we can start to understand this complex web of factors that led to this, like, pivotal moment.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing in this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We're dissecting this historical puzzle to uncover the motivations, the key players,
Mm-hmm.
and the lasting consequences of this audacious operation.
Yeah, and I think what we'll find is we'll explore how a clash of ideologies,
Okay.
a thirst for oil and a healthy dose of Cold War paranoia
Right.
really set the stage for an event that would reshape the Middle East and have ripple effects, that we still feel today.
So let's transport ourselves back to Iran in the early 1950s.
Okay.
Picture a nation grappling with its identity.
Right.
A monarchy with a shah, a parliament trying to find its footing,
Right.
and a society wrestling with these economic disparities and a yearning for independence.
This is a crucial point. I think, Iran at this time was a nation in transition,
Sure.
trying to modernize but also asserting its national identity.
Right.
And at the heart of this struggle was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, or AIOC.
AIOC.
Yeah.
I could already sense some resentment simmering just mentioning those letters.
Yeah.
Tell me more about their role in all of this.
Well, the AIOC was a British-owned enterprise
Okay.
that essentially controlled Iran's vast oil reserves.
Wow.
For many Iranians, the AIOC was like a symbol of colonial exploitation,
Right.
a stark reminder of a past they were trying to break free from.
So you've got this potent mix, right? A nation yearning for self-determination
Yeah.
and a foreign company reaping the benefits of their most valuable resource.
Right.
I mean, it's a recipe for tension, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And into this volatile mix enters Mohammad Mossadegh,
Okay.
a charismatic and fiercely nationalistic politician
Right.
who becomes prime minister in 1951.
Okay.
He quickly becomes a symbol of hope for many Iranians, promising to wrest control of their oil destiny from foreign hands.
And that promise translates into action, right? He nationalizes the Iranian oil industry.
Yes.
A move that I imagine sends shockwaves through the corridors of power in London.
Exactly. Nationalization was incredibly popular within Iran.
Sure.
But it was viewed as a direct threat by the British government and the AIOC. They had relied heavily on Iranian oil, both for their economy and for their military, particularly their navy.
So losing control of Iranian oil wasn't just an economic blow.
Right.
It was a strategic setback for the British,
Absolutely.
especially during this tense Cold War period. I can only imagine how they reacted to this audacious move by Mossadegh.
Yeah, their reaction was swift and decisive. They launched a plan known as Operation Boot,
Okay.
a covert operation aimed at undermining Mossadegh and ultimately removing him from power.
Operation Boot, that sounds a bit like something you'd find in like a spy novel.
Yeah.
Give us a peek behind the curtain. What did this operation actually entail?
Well, it was a multi-pronged approach.
Right.
The British imposed crippling economic sanctions on Iran,
Okay.
hoping to cripple the economy and turn the population against Mossadegh.
I see.
They also engaged in a propaganda campaign,
Okay.
spreading rumors and disinformation to discredit him and portray him as unstable or even a communist sympathizer.
Ah, yes. The communist card, a go-to tactic during the Cold War, it seems.
Yeah, it was a powerful tool, even if the accusations were often unfounded.
Right.
And in this case, while there was a communist party in Iran,
Yeah.
Mossadegh himself was not a communist. He was a nationalist focused on securing Iranian independence.
But nuances like that often get lost in the heat of the Cold War, don't they?
Sadly, they do. And the British weren't just relying on sanctions and propaganda.
Okay.
They also had operatives on the ground working to cultivate allies within Iran and sow discord within Mossadegh's government.
And these operatives, I bet they had some fascinating stories to tell.
Oh, they certainly did. One colorful character involved was Robin Zander,
Okay.
an Oxford professor and secret agent.
Wow.
He was known for his expertise on Persia and his penchant for opium.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Another key player was Monty Woodhouse,
Okay.
a World War II veteran who brought his military experience and strategic thinking to the operation.
Sounds like they had a real-life spy versus spy situation brewing in Iran.
Yeah.
But all their scheming, their sanctions and propaganda, did it actually work? Did Operation Boot succeed in ousting Mossadegh?
That's where things get even more interesting. You see, the Iranians weren't just sitting idly by while the British were plotting their downfall.
Right.
They had their own intelligence networks, and they were well aware of what was happening.
So they decided to play their own hand.
Precisely, in a bold move, Iran expelled British diplomats,
Wow.
effectively shutting down MI6's operation within the country.
So it backfired.
Operation Boot had backfired spectacularly.
Wow.
The British found themselves in a tricky situation.
Yeah.
Their initial plan had fallen apart,
Right.
and they were losing their grip on Iranian oil.
Of course.
But they weren't ready to give up just yet.
I see.
They needed a new strategy, and they needed a powerful ally.
So who did they turn to? Who could possibly step into this tangled web of international intrigue and Cold War anxieties?
Well, they turned to a rising power on the world stage.
Yeah.
The United States.
The Americans enter the scene. And I'm guessing their involvement wasn't solely about helping out their British allies.
Yeah.
There had to be more at play, right?
You're absolutely right. The early 1950s was the peak of the Cold War.
Sure.
The U.S., under President Eisenhower,
Okay.
viewed the world through a very specific lens.
Yeah.
One that saw the threat of communist expansion lurking around every corner.
So they saw Mossadegh and his nationalization of Iranian oil as a potential domino,
Right.
a tipping point that could push Iran into the Soviet sphere of influence.
Precisely, the fear was that if Iran fell under communist control,
Right.
it would not only jeopardize Western access to vital oil resources,
Sure.
but also embolden the Soviet Union and upset the delicate balance of power in the region.
It's fascinating how a seemingly local event,
Yeah,
the nationalization of an industry,
right.
could trigger such global anxieties.
Yeah,
It really highlights the interconnectedness of the world during this period.
it certainly does. And these Cold War anxieties
Yeah.
fueled the U.S.'s willingness to get involved in what was essentially a British problem.
Okay.
They saw an opportunity to not only protect their interests,
Sure.
but also to flex their muscles as a global power.
So the British, reeling from the failure of Operation Boot,
Yeah,
find a willing partner in the Americans
right.
who are eager to contain the perceived communist threat.
Yes.
And together they decide to orchestrate a coup to remove Mossadegh from power and install a more pro-Western leader.
Exactly. And to spearhead this audacious plan,
Okay.
the CIA tapped a man who, on the surface,
Yeah.
seemed like an unlikely candidate for such a clandestine operation.
Right.
Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Teddy Roosevelt.
Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the name itself sounds like something out of an adventure novel.
It does.
What was he like? Was he a seasoned spy? A master of disguise?
Well, in many ways, he was the opposite of what you might expect from a CIA operative.
Okay.
He was described as bookish and unassuming,
Really?
more comfortable in a library than in a shadowy backroom deal.
Interesting.
But beneath that quiet exterior was a sharp mind and a willingness to take risks.
And boy, did this operation require some serious risk-taking.
It did.
Their first move was a bold one,
Okay.
arranging a secret meeting with the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi.
The Shah was a key player in this whole saga.
Right, yeah.
He was the monarch.
You're right.
But his power was somewhat limited by the Constitution and the rising influence of politicians like Mossadegh.
So they needed to convince the Shah to support the coup,
Yeah.
to essentially side with them against his own prime minister.
Right.
That couldn't have been an easy sell.
It wasn't. The Shah was hesitant, unsure of whether to back this risky plan.
Right.
He was wary of foreign interference.
Yeah.
And he was also concerned about potential backlash from the Iranian people.
So how did Kermit Roosevelt,
Well,
this unassuming, bookish CIA operative,
yeah.
convince the Shah to take such a gamble?
He had to appeal to the Shah's self-interest.
Okay.
She had to make it clear that the U.S. and the U.K. were firmly behind this operation, and that they would support the Shah in consolidating his power.
I bet those conversations were tense.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine being in that room, the weight of history hanging in the balance.
The stakes were incredibly high.
Yeah.
And to further reassure the Shah,
Okay.
They resorted to a rather unusual method of communication.
Right.
A coded message broadcast by the BBC.
The BBC.
Yeah.
The bastion of objective journalism.
Right.
I never would have imagined them being involved in a covert operation.
It might seem surprising, but the BBC had a history of broadcasting coded messages,
Oh, really?
particularly during World War II.
I see.
These messages were often subtle.
Okay.
A slight change in wording a specific musical piece played at a certain time,
Right.
but those in the know could decipher their meaning.
So in the midst of their regular programming,
Right.
the BBC slipped in a message confirming to the Shah that this coup had the full backing of the U.S. and U.K. governments.
Yeah.
It's like something out of a spy thriller.
It really is, and this coded message played a crucial role in convincing the Shah to take the leap and support the coup.
Wow.
He saw it as a sign that he wasn't alone in this gamble.
Right.
That he had powerful allies backing him.
So we've got our key players in place.
Yeah.
A reluctant Shah, a cunning CIA operative,
Hmm.
and a plan fueled by Cold War anxieties and a desire for control.
Right?
Now let's delve into the nitty-gritty. How did they actually pull off this audacious coup?
Well, it involved a mix of classic spycraft
Okay.
and some surprisingly low-tech tactics.
Right.
They bribed politicians,
Right.
spread rumors, and even hired local thugs to stage pro-Shah demonstrations
Wow.
and create a sense of chaos in the streets.
It sounds like they were creating a carefully crafted illusion,
Yeah,
a narrative designed to make Mossadegh look weak and unstable.
exactly. They were exploiting existing tensions within Iranian society
Sure.
and amplifying them for their own ends
Right.
and to further destabilize the situation. They relied on the expertise of those well-connected Iranian agents we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
the Rashidian brothers.
Ah, yes, the Rashidian brothers, MI6's men on the ground.
Right.
Tell me more about their role in all of this.
These brothers were master manipulators.
Okay.
They had their fingers on the pulse of Tehran's underworld,
I see.
and they knew how to leverage their network of informants, thugs, and religious figures to influence public opinion
Wow.
and stir up unrest.
So they were essentially the muscle behind the operation.
Yeah.
The ones who could translate the CIA's grand strategy into action on the streets of Tehran.
That's a good way to put it. They were the ones who could make things happen.
Right.
Spread rumors, instigate protests, and generally make life difficult for Mossadegh and his supporters.
It's incredible to think that the fate of a nation could hinge on the actions of a few well-connected individuals
Yeah.
operating in the shadows.
It really does highlight the power of human agency, even in the midst of seemingly overwhelming historical forces.
So while the Shah was safely tucked away at his hunting lodge,
Right.
Kermit Roosevelt and his team were busy pulling strings, spreading disinformation, and setting the stage for a dramatic showdown.
And then the moment of truth arrived. The Shah, from his secluded retreat,
Yeah.
signed the crucial decrees, one dismissing Mossadegh,
Okay.
the other appointing General Fazlollah Zahedi as the new prime minister.
These decrees were essentially the trigger,
Yes.
the official orders that would set the coup in motion.
Precisely. And with those decrees signed,
Right.
the stage was set for a high-stakes gamble.
Yeah.
A gamble that could either solidify the Shah's power or plunge Iran into further chaos.
The tension must have been palpable in those final hours before the coup was launched.
Oh, yeah.
What was the atmosphere like in Tehran?
Well, imagine a city on edge, rumors swirling, political tensions simmering,
Right.
and a sense of uncertainty hanging in the air. People knew something was brewing,
There.
but they weren't sure what to expect.
It sounds like a powder keg waiting to be ignited.
That's a good analogy. And when that powder keg finally exploded,
wow.
the consequences were far-reaching and, in many ways, unpredictable.
And that, my friends, is where we'll leave you hanging on the precipice of this historical turning point.
Okay.
Did the coup succeed in ousting Mossadegh and installing the Shah as the unchallenged ruler of Iran?
Right.
Or did their carefully laid plans unravel, leading to even greater instability and resentment?
To find out what happened next, you'll have to join us for the final chapter of this gripping tale.
Okay, so last time we left off with the Shah signing those decrees, setting this coup in motion.
Right.
But things didn't quite go according to plan, did they?
Not exactly Mossadegh. He was a pretty savvy politician, and
Yeah.
he caught wind of the plan.
Really?
Yeah, he actually managed to intercept those decrees
Wow.
and expose the coup attempt.
So the element of surprise was gone.
Right.
What was the reaction? I mean, did the whole operation just fall apart right then and there?
It certainly looked that way at first. Mossadegh went on the radio and announced that he had thwarted a foreign-backed coup.
So he went public with it.
He did. It sent shockwaves through Tehran.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
What did this mean for the Shah then?
Well, the Shah, always a cautious figure,
Right.
panicked,
Okay.
fearing for his safety and the potential backlash.
Right.
He fled the country.
He left.
He actually piloted his own plane out of Iran,
Wow.
first to Baghdad and then on to Rome.
But the figurehead of the coup,
Right.
the one they were supposed to be installing in power,
Yeah.
was now in exile.
Right.
I mean, I can only imagine Kermit Roosevelt and the CIA team must have been like, what do we do?
It was a major step back.
Yeah.
You know, here they were in the midst of this high-stakes operation,
Right.
and their key player had abandoned ship.
Oh, wow.
There were calls to abort the mission, to cut their losses and get out while they could.
But Kermit Roosevelt wasn't one to back down easily, was he?
No, he wasn't.
What was his plan at that point? The Shah was gone. The coup was out in the open.
Right.
It seems like an impossible situation.
It was a long shot, no doubt.
Yeah.
Kermit's new strategy relied on mobilizing pro-Shah elements within the Iranian military
Okay.
and creating enough chaos to force Mossadegh out.
So even without the Shah physically present,
Yeah,
they were going to try to swing the balance of power in his favor.
exactly. And a key part of this strategy was money.
Of course.
The CIA funneled even more cash to their Iranian contacts,
I see.
buying loyalty and influence within the military and among key political figures.
It's amazing how money can influence events, even on the world stage.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool.
But cash alone couldn't have been enough.
Right.
What else did they do?
Well, remember the Rashidian brothers?
Yeah.
Those MI6 assets we discussed earlier?
The ones with the connections?
Yeah, they proved to be crucial at this stage.
Okay.
Their network of street thugs, former military men,
Right.
and pro-Shah activists
Yeah.
were unleashed on Tehran.
So they were stirring up unrest, making the city ungovernable,
Exactly.
adding to the sense of crisis.
Precisely. They organized protests,
Yeah.
clashed with Mossadegh supporters,
Right.
and created a climate of fear and uncertainty.
I see.
It was a calculated strategy to erode public support for Mossadegh
Right.
and make him appear unable to control the situation.
And alongside this unrest, the propaganda machine kept churning, didn't it?
Oh yeah, pro-Shah messages flooded the airwaves and newspapers.
Wow.
They even managed to secure a fatwa, a religious decree, from a prominent Ayatollah condemning Mossadegh.
A fatwa. That's a powerful tool, especially in a country like Iran, where religion plays such a central role in society.
Absolutely, by securing this fatwa,
Yeah.
they were essentially using the weight of religious authority to undermine Mossadegh's legitimacy. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare.
So we have this incredible mix of factors at play.
Yeah.
The CIA pouring money into the operation.
Right.
The Rashidian brothers orchestrating unrest.
Mm-hmm.
And a religious decree condemning Mossadegh, all creating this whirlwind of chaos.
It was a high-risk gamble,
Yeah.
a desperate attempt to salvage the coup from the brink of collapse.
And it worked.
Incredibly, against all odds, it worked.
Also.
Well, on August 19th, just a few days after the Shah had fled,
Okay.
pro-Shah forces, emboldened by CIA support and the growing sense of instability,
Right.
stormed key government buildings and military installations.
So this wasn't just street protests anymore. This was a full-blown military takeover.
Yes, and Mossadegh, despite attempts to resist,
Yeah.
was ultimately overwhelmed.
Wow.
He was arrested, tried, and placed under house arrest for the rest of his life.
A tragic end for a leader who, despite his flaws, had sought to assert Iranian independence.
It's a reminder that history is full of complex characters,
Right.
and that events rarely have simple explanations or clear-cut heroes and villains.
The coup succeeded.
Yeah.
The Shah returned from his exile triumphant, but forever changed by the experience.
Yeah.
But was this victory worth the price?
That's the question that lingers.
Yes.
The 1953 coup might have achieved its immediate objective, removing Mossadegh and securing Western access to Iranian oil.
Right.
But it also planted the seeds of resentment that would eventually lead to the 1979 Iranian Revolution and the rise of the Islamic Republic.
So the very intervention intended to stabilize Iran and prevent it from falling into the Soviet sphere of influence
Right.
ultimately laid the groundwork for an even more dramatic transformation.
Yeah.
The irony is almost Shakespearean.
It's a stark reminder that intervening in the affairs of another country, even with seemingly good intentions,
Right.
can have unforeseen and often disastrous consequences.
And that's what makes history so fascinating, so compelling.
Absolutely.
It's not just a series of dates and events, but a complex tapestry of choices, actions, and unintended consequences
Yeah.
that continue to shape our world today.
And that's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the 1953 Iranian coup.
Mm.
It's a story filled with intrigue, betrayal, and lessons that resonate, even now, decades later.
And if there's one thing to take away from this episode,
Yeah,
it's that history is rarely black and white. There are always shades of gray.
absolutely.
And understanding the nuances of the past can help us navigate the complexities of the present.
Couldn't have said it better myself.